Tonight on Bridge City News, our province has a spending problem. Tonight we will explain how bad it really is. It is back to school time and Lethbridge Police have a simple reminder for motorists. And Hurricane Dorian has now claimed 5 lives after slamming into the East Coast. We have the latest.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. A new report says Alberta has a spending problem. The McKinnon panel, which put together a look at our province's finances, says Alberta's spending per capita is the highest in Canada and has been so for more than 2 decades. It says Alberta's debt increased from $13 billion to $60 billion over the last 4 years and was on track to exceed $100 billion. The panel found that without a change in spending philosophy, interest payments on that debt will grow from $1.9 to $3.7 billion per year. The report compared government spending in areas such as healthcare, education, and advanced education. The UCP say they plan to balance the budget by 2022-2023 without raising taxes. The Labor Day long weekend is over, and that means one thing: back to school. Kids and their caregivers filled our sidewalks today as children entered another year of academics. It can be easy to forget to slow down in school zones, but Lethbridge Police would like to remind drivers to stay alert.
You're the driver, you have to be professional and you need to see the signs, regardless if it's a new area. More importantly, if it's a new area, you need to be familiar with your surroundings and make sure that the other users are safe. Well, distracted driving is very important. Like I said, we have a lot more people that are going to be using the streets now that school's back in. Post-secondary is very busy, and if you're distracted on your phones in your vehicle, you're missing potentially something and could be involved in an accident because of that.
School zones have a posted speed limit of 30 kilometers per hour and are in effect on school days from 7:30 a.m. till 4:30 p.m. Fire crews and CP Rail were called out to a train derailment by the village of Barons yesterday. Lethbridge County says an evacuation order was imposed when it was discovered that some of the tankers were leaking octane. The derailment occurred on Highway 23 by Township Road 12. The area remained closed for many hours while crews cleaned up. Fortunately, there were no injuries, and the evacuation order was lifted by 4 p.m. yesterday. The second-degree murder trial of Ryland Twigg and Simon Scout began today at the Lethbridge Courthouse. The two were charged in the second-degree murder of Kenrick Firstrider following a verbal dispute at a home on November 27th of 2017. The pair have decided to be tried by judge alone, and the trial should last around 6 weeks. A Lethbridge resident was among 4 people and 3 groups honored by the province and received a 2019 Alberta Community Justice Award. The event, which celebrates Albertans who have made outstanding contributions to crime prevention, was held August 30th in Edmonton. Adonis Arlett of Lethbridge was one of the lucky recipients. Arlett is the program manager of the Lethbridge Corridor Victim Services Unit, who introduced a victim services support dog to help victims navigate the criminal justice process. The YWCA of Lethbridge and the Taber Police Service Auxiliary Policing Program were also among those who were honored. The Streets Alive evening meal program is moving to the Soup Kitchen beginning October 1st. The Soup Kitchen, located at 802 2A Avenue North, is a larger venue which can accommodate over 100 people at a time.
The other aspect of it as well that everybody misses out, we all like sitting around the table as family. And so this is an opportunity to create a social environment as well, not only with probably a lot of people that they know on the street, but with the volunteers who get a chance to interact with them. And it just builds a good sense of community.
My approach has always been we need to restore the dignity of people. There's not a lot of dignity waiting in line at a soup kitchen. And this way, by enhancing our facility, by painting, new lighting, pictures on the walls, new furniture as of this morning, a newly waxed floor, which hadn't been done for a long time. So we think we are prepared to serve. Our kitchen is very adequate to serve up to 125 people if need be.
The Streets Alive mission not only helps provide food, but also clean clothing, personal hygiene items, and life recovery skills training for those in need in our community. You should be receiving a phone call asking if you think Lethbridge should have a compost pickup. The city is working with Ipsos on the survey to gather the community's current perceptions of organics waste collection. The survey should take up to 10 to 15 minutes and will gather valuable insight into year-round organics food and yard waste collection. In November of 2016, City Council wanted administration to put forth a plan for a curbside organics program. The proposal is being developed and should come forward to Council this fall. Agriculture Minister Marie-Claude Bebeau says the government is now accepting new applications for the Agri-Risk Initiatives program. It supports the development of new risk management tools for the agriculture sector. Now, there's a new category for this year called microgrants. It'll provide up to $25,000 per year in funding for academic research proposals that explore the development of alternative risk management tools. They can also be used to propose different ways to address issues with existing BRM programs. A program that collects unwanted pesticides in old medicine is gearing up. Clean Farms is a Canadian nonprofit group that delivers recycling and disposal solutions that help farmers and their communities safely manage farm waste. It runs the program to gather unwanted and old pesticides and livestock medications every 3 years at no cost to farmers. It is funded by the crop protection industry and the Canadian Animal Health Institute. Just as Lethbridge hit 100,000 people comes a new municipal census figure for the city of Calgary. Figures released today indicates the Stampede City now has 1.29 million people living in it. That's a 1.4% increase from last year. Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi says the data shows some concerning trends, including people leaving older neighborhoods and moving more into the suburbs. Figures also show a declining birth rate, which Nenshi says emphasizes the need for more immigration to maintain a financially healthy city and workforce. Alberta Health Services is launching free workshops to help people take control of their health. A 6-week series called Better Choices, Better Health is designed to support those living with diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, Crohn's, and mental health issues. The workshops begin September 11th and run through October 16th at Alberta Healthy Living. To register, you can call the number toll-free, 1-866-506-6654. The union representing 55,000 education workers is asking for a strike mandate from its members as students head back to class across Ontario. Laura Walton, who is the president of CUPE's Ontario School Board Council of Unions, says she expects workers to give the union a strong mandate when voting finishes in 2 weeks as contract talks with the Ford government continue.
Just last week, CUPE education workers at the Toronto District School Board pointed out that while the board reports that there are 52 caretaker positions have been cut, the union has received notice of 90 caretaker positions being lost. And that's just one of the budget anomalies in boards across Ontario. This is the new normal for public education in Doug Ford's Ontario. This government's cuts hurt students. The government's not really willing to work right now. They have their line in the sand that they want, and we're saying, we have to work together on this if we're going to make some movement. So right now, we're seeing a lot of concessions that will be detrimental to the service provision for our students, and we are not willing to accept less for the students in Ontario.
Hurricane Dorian has now claimed 5 lives as it hit the northwest Bahamas, flooding the islands of Abaco and the Grand Bahama with walls of water. The storm was reduced to a Category 3 hurricane earlier today with winds around 120 miles an hour or 193 kilometers an hour.
Dorian is still stationary just to the north of Grand Bahama Island, about 30 miles to the northeast of Freeport. The maximum winds have decreased slightly to 120 miles per hour, but this does still keep Dorian as a major Category 3 hurricane. So we're still expecting destructive winds, very high storm surges along the coast of Grand Bahama Island as we speak. Not moving much, has not moved much over the past couple of hours, and it may not move much for another few hours. It's just parked right over Grand Bahama Island, or very near there.
The Red Cross has opened shelters across Central Florida following the arrival of Hurricane Dorian, which has slammed into the state's Atlantic coast.
This is an evacuation shelter. So what we're doing is we have snacks here. We have 3 meals per day. We have a roof over their head. We have security here. We have nurses here. So if you're going to come to the shelter, which is an evacuation shelter, please bring your blankets, your blow-up mattresses, your food, your snacks, anything that's going to make you comfortable.
He's actually my guide dog, but he actually works as a stress relief dog. You can't imagine how stressful it is for the people who are coming into our shelter. Some of them have all sorts of different disabilities, and they need the support of something to relieve their stress with.
4 more victims of a catastrophic dive boat fire have been found on the ocean floor off of Southern California. At least 8 people are now known dead. The Coast Guard says crews are still searching for more than 24 people.
The incident today began at approximately 3:30 a.m. The Coast Guard sector in Los Angeles received a mayday call that was from a fully engulfed 75-foot commercial diving vessel that was off the coast of Santa Cruz Island. The crews were actively fighting the fire when the vessel began to sink at approximately 7:20 a.m. this morning. 39 souls were reported to be on board that vessel when it left Santa Barbara. 5 victims were subsequently rescued during the initial response and have been transported to Ventura Harbor. 4 victims have been recovered thus far as deceased. They have been transported to our coroner's bureau. We can only identify them at this point as 2 adult males and 2 adult females. Rescue and recovery efforts on the scene have located an additional 4 victims on the ocean floor in close proximity to the vessel.
Authorities say the gunman in a West Texas rampage was fired from his job and called police just before the mass shooting began. The shooting spree, which terrorized 2 towns, killed 7 people.
He called 911, Odessa Police Department's 911, and so did his employer. And basically they were complaining on each other because they had a disagreement over the fire.
I want to be clear, he showed up to work in a very distressed mental state. So it's not because he got fired, right? This did not happen because he was fired, which other active shooters have occurred. When he showed up to work, he was already enraged. Before and after the DPS trooper was shot, there are phone calls from the subject.
So while he was on the shooting rampage, he was calling 911?
Yes. He's called us before. It was, again, the rambling statements of someone who has some mental distress. He didn't threaten. He didn't say much to help us.
Who will ever know what motive is, because the only way to determine that is if we can talk to him, and we can't.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson suffered key defections from his party today. Johnson lost a working majority in Parliament and has weakened his position as he tried to prevent lawmakers from blocking his Brexit plans.
It is simply wrong to say we are not making progress. There is a lot to do in the coming days, but things are moving. And a major reason for that is that everyone can see that this government is utterly determined to leave the EU on October the 31st, come what may, without a deal if necessary. We are negotiating a deal. And though I am confident of getting a deal, we will leave by October the 31st in all circumstances. There will be no further pointless delay.
Jonathan Cahn is an author and leader of Hope of the World Ministry. He recently joined us to say that we should not be surprised that the world is becoming less Christian. He says it is going back to the way it once was.
The world, where was the world 2,000 years ago? It was not Christian. It was pagan, unchristian, anti-Christian. What we are witnessing right now in the book, it's called The Dark Jubilee, is the world is returning, mainstream culture is returning back to its unchristian state, its anti-Christian state, its pagan state. That's why every day we turn on the news and we see another move toward it. It's not an accident. It's part of the mystery. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be revival, because one of the other mysteries is that where was the church 2,000 years ago? What was our original state? It was the book of Acts. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't rich. It wasn't cultural. It was revolutionary, radical, prophetic, world-changing.
Catch the full interview with Mr. Cahn and BCN's Paul Arthur discussing our ever-changing world coming up in the second half of our program. We had lots of sunshine once again today, but will the warm temperatures stick around? I'll have complete weather details coming up in just a moment. We had a mostly sunny day again today. Tonight, the clouds return with a slight chance of showers and a low near 12. Just a few clouds tomorrow with a high expected near 27. Thursday, the rain clouds return with a high of 23. More clouds and showers on Friday with the mercury dropping to 21. Saturday, mainly cloudy with a high of 20. Sunday, more rain developing with a high of only 17. Monday, overcast and 17 degrees once again. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 23 and an average low of 7. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1950 at 37 degrees, and the record low was only -2 in 1962. Sunrise was at 6:49, sunset at 8:12. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Just a few clouds at 22 degrees for Victoria, BC, clearing at 23 for Vancouver. A good chance of showers at 24s on tap for Calgary. Rain at 25 for Edmonton tomorrow. Showers at 21 for Regina. Mainly cloudy and showers for Saskatoon tomorrow and a high of 22. Sunshine at 22 as well for Winnipeg on Wednesday. Rain at 19 degrees for Toronto. A good chance of showers and 21 for both Ottawa and Montreal. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will have showers off and on a high of 22. Halifax, Nova Scotia will have periods of drizzle and 20. It'll be mainly cloudy in Charlottetown, PEI and 24. And at St. John's, Newfoundland, expect showers and a high near 23 degrees tomorrow. Air Canada says the $3.5 billion bid by Onyx Corporation of WestJet Airlines would violate federal rules that limit foreign ownership of carriers. Air Canada has filed a challenge to deal with the Canadian Transportation Agency. Federal Transport Minister Marc Garneau and the Competition Bureau have already approved the deal, which WestJet shareholders approved by a 92.5% margin back in July. The United Auto Workers Union has picked General Motors as its target company for this year's contract talks. The move means that GM will be the focus of bargaining, and any deal with the company will set the pattern for Ford and Fiat Chrysler. It also means GM will be the strike target if negotiations falter. The union's contract with GM, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler are set to expire on September 14th. The British pound hit one of its lowest levels against the US dollar in almost 34 years earlier today. Investors are worried about a political showdown over Brexit this week. It sent the British currency to 1.19, down almost a cent on the day. Brexit is facing a crucial few days as opposition lawmakers and some Tory MPs are poised to block PM Boris Johnson from bringing the country out of the EU without a deal at the end of October. Johnson says he will call an early election if the effort succeeds. When it comes to finances and budgeting, it is important to remember that a budget can be helpful and should never be looked at as a hindrance. Now, that's according to Michael Bell, author of the book, Managing God's Money.
Many people see a budget as a straitjacket, as something confining them. But the budget is a tool. We control the budget. People say, my budget is $5, and no, you know what? My goal to achieve this item is $5. But if the goal changes and I can find some funds, I'll change it to $7. Or I change the goal. A budget is dynamic.
Watch the full interview with Michael Bell and BCN's Paul Arthur discussing how to properly manage your money. That's coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, 5 people have been killed and more than 13,000 homes and businesses have been destroyed from Hurricane Dorian. The hurricane packing winds of 193 kilometers an hour has hit the eastern seaboard very hard, including the Bahamas and Florida. The world is becoming more pagan and less Christian. So says author and leader of Hope of the World Ministry, Jonathan Cahn. Mr. Cahn has details next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The 2019 FlexAir Parkinson's Step in Stride fundraising walk is taking place Sunday, September 8th at Henderson Lake Park. Registration is at 1 p.m. with the walk beginning at 2. This is their largest fundraising event, and money raised goes to support services, education, and research that make every day better for those with Parkinson's disease and the people who care for them. To register and to donate, visit parkinsonassociation.ca/stepinstride. It's the 39th annual Lethbridge Terry Fox Community Run, taking place Sunday, September 15th at the Civic Center track. featuring special guest Fred Fox, Terry's brother. Registration begins at 11 a.m. with the run at noon. No entry fee is required. Participants are welcome to walk, run, rollerblade, and cycle. For more information, email lethbridgeterryfoxrun@gmail.com or register online at terryfox.ca. Empty Arms is a self-help group for families who've experienced miscarriage, ectopic pregnancy, stillbirth, or neonatal death. Come and find support from those who understand what you're going through. This group meets the first Wednesday of every month from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at the Family Center in the Lethbridge Center Mall. For more information, call 403-320-4232. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Biblical prophecy is a fascinating subject, and those of you who study it will likely be familiar with today's guest, Jonathan Cahn. He is a New York Times best-selling author, perhaps best known for his book, The Harbinger. He is also the leader of Hope of the World Ministry, and his newest book is The Oracle. Now, you can get that at theoracleiscoming.com, also hopeoftheworld.org. You can check out both of those websites there. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for making time for us here today.
My blessing to be on with you, Paul. First time I'm I'm doing Canada. It's a blessing to speak to you.
Oh, we're glad you're with us here for sure. So, you know how to get people's attention here. Your books, again, bestsellers. They're sometimes controversial, and you're talking about the times we live in and times yet to come. So, tell us a little bit about the mystery of the Oracle.
Yeah, the Oracle is really the biggest mysteries. People know me from the Harbinger and Shemitah and other things like that. It's really the biggest one in that it is the really mystery of the ages. It's behind what lies behind the past, the present, right now, current events, the future. It's really the blueprint of end time prophecy. It is so specific that it gives exact dates and times when things are to happen based on God's calendar. And it's been blowing me away for about 2 years. I've been working on it for 2 years. I've never had so much to put in. And it really, it has, for instance, the mysteries of the Jubilee, that every so many years, there is a gigantic prophetic event that takes place like clockwork, according to this mystery. There's a mystery of the appointed words of God, that in every synagogue across the world, the Jewish people open up the scrolls every week on Sabbath, and they read the appointed scripture it was appointed from ages past. But what the Oracle is revealing, that when these things are read, in the world, events take place that match up with those words, and it's again and again and again. There is something called the mystery of the stranger, a man who appears in the land of Israel about 150 years ago, and that really begins the end time. Something that was prophesied by Moses. Something called the Jubilean Code, where in the ancient law of Jubilee, there's actually, in the Hebrew words, it gives the date in the 20th century when a gigantic event takes place. There's the mystery of Donald Trump, even. We'll get in there. The rise of nations are in this. Why America rose when it did, why the British Empire fell when it did. There is really also the mystery of what's something called the Dark Jubilee, which is that a mystery that the whole world is following right now. We're watching it in all our culture, but that's all from this mystery. It gives exact times, and ultimately it's linked to the coming of Messiah. So it's very big, and also it is also linked to each of us. It's very personal, because the mystery of the Jubilee has to do with God's plan for your life, for each of our lives. So it's gigantic.
This all kind of came about when you took a trip to Canada in our 150th anniversary, and that kind of stirred things up for you, right?
That's right. It was actually in the year of one of these Jubilee. I was asked to speak in Canada. I hadn't been to Canada in 50 years, Jubilee, since I was a little kid. I had been there once before. Everything when I was there it was the Jubilee of Canada. Everything I was getting bombarded with Jubilee. Without knowing it, I planned to speak about the Jubilee. I had no idea about Canada, about that. It was this time, and that's when the Lord gave me the genesis of the Oracle, and this is the only interview I'm probably saying it, but all you guys in Canada, it really came, and it wasn't just an accident. It came because I was in Canada. It had everything to do with it. That's how it came about.
Well, that's fascinating. Okay, well, thanks for sharing that with us here. Now, why don't you take us through that first story you mentioned, The Stranger. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, and for people to understand, also, it's set up like the Harbinger, that it's going to be full of really facts, revelation. It's all true. But to make it even more like accessible, I framed it in a story like the Harbinger, where a man looks to find a man called the Oracle, who then starts opening up these revelations of God. And as he does, it's done through these 7 doors, and each one is linked to a whole stream of mystery. So I can only touch on scratch the surface of the surface of the surface. But I mentioned in the first door is the mystery I mentioned called the stranger. Moses, before he dies, tells Israel, the Jewish people, they're going to be scattered to the ends of the earth. It all came true. At the end times, he's going to bring them back. Came true. He says, before that happens, though, there's going to be a sign. A stranger is going to come from the ends of the earth, come to the land of Israel, bear witness that it is a desolate devastation, and then God is going to start bringing the Jewish people back. Did it happen? It did happen. And the stranger came from far away, came to the land, bore witness to the world about the desolation of it. And who was the stranger? We all know him. It was Mark Twain. He actually, the writer actually fulfilled biblical prophecy. And he did it. Not only that, when he reaches the peak of his journey, he's in Jerusalem. It's his last full day and night. He's in Jerusalem. All around the world, the Jewish people are opening up their scrolls. It's the appointed word. They read the appointed word on that day. And what is it? It's the prophecy that the stranger will come to the land. So here he is, Mark Twain. He's in Jerusalem, and they're chanting it about him, and he doesn't know it. So he fulfills that. And the thing is, and one thing about, well, there's so much, but Mark Twain's real name was Samuel Clemens, as we know. But for 2,000 years, the Jewish people have been praying, Lord, hear our prayers, hear us, and have mercy, and bring us back to the land. Hear our prayers, have mercy. The name Samuel means the Lord has heard, and the name Clemens means and has been merciful. So even from his birth. So all this begins, This is 1867. This is the first Jubilee. By the way, it's also Canada, but it's the first Jubilee of Restoration. And if you count 50 years, you're going to come to the next Jubilee. Now, again, there's like 8 other mysteries from that first door, but let's go to the second door. You count that, you go to the next one, it takes you to the year 1917. Is that significant in prophecy? Gigantic. In that year, that's the year that Great Britain issues the Balfour Declaration, which gives the land of Israel back to the Jewish people. What is the Jubilee? The land shall return to the people. And in that year, after 2,000 years, the occupiers, it was Muslim at that time, hostile occupiers, flee the land, and the British Empire, for the first time, gives it to the Jewish people. So Jubilee, just like that. And there's a million mysteries to that one, but there's not time. So I'll go to the next one. If we go, now, there's a man named Theodor Herzl. And Theodor Herzl, a lot of people know it. He's the father of Israel. He's the vision of Israel years before. And Herzl gathers together a Congress called the First Zionist Congress. It's about returning to the land. And there's no nation, but they get a flag, they get an anthem. It's all by faith. But Theodor Herzl writes in his diary, he says, today we founded the Jewish state. Now the world would laugh if they heard it. But he said, 50 years from now, Jubilee, all the world will know it. Well, when did he write that? He wrote that in 1897. Count 50 years, it takes you to 1947, the year that Israel is voted back into the world, the very thing. And when I looked at the document, the resolution that brought Israel back, it has a date on it. And the date is September 3rd, 1947. I went back. Herzl's prophecy is dated September 3rd. It's 50 years to the exact date.
That is fascinating. That's fascinating.
Now,
wow.
Now let me give you another one. I'm going real quick because we got to go through the door. So with this too, that on the day that Israel was born into the world, May 14th, 1948, it was a Sabbath. That means there was an appointed word read all over the world. What was it? It was appointed for ages for that day. What was it? It was the word, the prophecy God gave in Amos. It said, in that day, I will raise up the fallen tabernacle of David. I will bring my people. I will plant my people in the land. I will rebuild the nation as in ancient times. And the whole prophecy of the rebirth of Israel, as they're chanting it, it's actually rising from the dead. Who could put that together? And I mentioned something called the Jubilean Code. In the law of the Jubilees, this is Moses, law of Jubilees, it says to Israel, you shall return. It says each one shall return to their ancestral land. You shall return. First time God tells everybody you shall return. If you take that Hebrew, in Hebrew, you shall return is tashavu. You take it now, in Hebrew, every letter has a number value. The way you write years in Hebrew, you actually use Hebrew letters. They each have a number. That's how you write the year. Okay. So the amazing thing, Paul, is that you shall return 3,000 years ago. It comes out to, the numerical amount comes out to 1948.
That's
The very year
incredible.
that Israel comes back into the world. I mean, who can do that?
I mean, you know, as you're talking, you're firing off all these numbers and these, you know, coincidences, right? You know, again, some people will say no, they're coincidences. You're saying no, these are God incidences. That you know, God has His finger all over this. I know why you're selling so many books now. You get people's attention for sure. My goodness.
Well, really, yeah, really, the oracle. I mean, is we're living in an age where people are trying to dismiss God. That's old.
Yeah,
Well, the
yeah.
oracle is really an explosion of the reality of God, and I'm hoping, and that it's also going to go to not just believers, but given to people who are not believers, because it's God. The same God of the Bible is totally alive, and our whole lives have been influenced by it. Even the rise of America. America rises at the superpower at the very moment it's needed to bring Israel back into the world. I mean, God always does that. He's the same God. He's alive. And if you take where we were, we said 1867. We have the one I just told you about is a political jubilee, a special one with Herzl. But 1867, then you have 1917. What's the next one? Could anything significant happen concerning restoration? It takes you to the year 1967. Is that significant? That year comes the 6-Day War. In that year, the one thing that was missing was Jerusalem. Israel has to have Jerusalem for Messiah, Jesus, to come back. He said, I'm only coming back to Jerusalem with them there. So what happens? 6-Day War happens. And at the end of it, Israeli soldiers are entering the city of Jerusalem after 2,000 years. The Jubilee says everyone shall return to their land. So here, everything is being put in place like that. And there's a prophecy, Paul, that I found it in Isaiah, which it says God will come down and fight for Jerusalem as the lion and the young lion for that hill, that mountain, that Temple Mount. Well, amazing thing. And I won't go. There's in the oracle. There's one of the mysteries in behind this. The fourth door. There's so many, but one is called the Day of the Lions. I'll just mention one thing. The first two soldiers to enter the gates of Jerusalem and go on the Temple Mount, there was the commander, a guy named Mata Gor, and the other one was named Arik Achman, his assistant. They go to the Temple Mount and say, we have the Temple Mount. Now, the amazing thing is, Gor, his name means, the prophet says, God says, I will fight like a lion and a young lion. Gor's name means the young lion. His assistant's name means the lion. And so God says, I will fight for Jerusalem like the lion and the young lion. And they're there. And the gate they went through was the lion's gate, a sign that the next time Messiah comes, he's not coming as a lamb, he's coming as a lion. And this is and even as the soldiers get to the wall, what happens to the Jubilee, Paul? The trumpet is blown, right? Well, actually, the sound of the trumpet. Well, actually, when he got there, the trumpet was blown. A rabbi is blowing the trumpet, and he didn't even do it for this reason. And that rabbi was born in 1917. He was 50 years old. It was his Jubilee, and his name means the horn. His name, Rabbi Goren, means Rabbi Horn. I mean, who can put this together?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, putting all these things together in that kind of a sequence and just, wow, it really makes you think. And again, we want to always come back to what Scripture says, right? So, I mean, we don't want to make up things as we go, and I know you're particular about that. You want to make sure that this actually lines up with what the Bible says, right?
Totally, and the thing is, our whole lives are lining up with what the Bible says. All these things have affected everyone's life in one way or the other. And the thing is, and I'll fast forward quickly. If we go to the next Jubilee and year, where that takes us now, could something else happen? During the Jubilee, what happens? You don't just return to your land; you get the legal right to it. It's recognized, legal right. Well, Israel never got that. In 1967, no country ever recognized Jerusalem. Well, fast forward, what's the next 50th year? It's 2017. That's when I was in Canada. That's when the Oracle began. It was before this event happened, and it happens. What is it? The Jerusalem Declaration. For the first time in 2,000 years, a major power recognizes, gives the right of Jerusalem to its original owner, Jubilee, the Jewish people. Now, think about this, Paul. And of course, it was Donald Trump. And it doesn't matter what you think about Donald Trump. It has nothing to do with the person. God is over everything. He can use a Trump. Now, listen, what happens in the year of Jubilee? Well, the trumpet sounds. Well, what does the name Trump mean in English? It means the trumpet. The trumpet. So you got the Jubilee. And so The trumpet has to. The trump has to sound. And so when was it? It was 2000. When did he come to power? 2017. It says the very year of Jubilee. It says the trump shall sound throughout the land. Well, he's been sounding ever since, and tweeting. But also it says when the trump sounds, it says that the land will return to the original owner, and that's exactly what happened. The sixth door deals with what is yet to come. What is yet to come. And I will just say this, there's so much. This is the end time. They're really the key of end time prophecy. What's going to happen? One of the mysteries of the Jubilee is that everybody returns to where they were. So everything has to return to where it was at the beginning. In the end, it has to return to where it was at the beginning of the age. Jewish people were in Israel. They're back in Israel. But the world, where was the world 2,000 years ago? It was not Christian. It was pagan, unchristian, anti-Christian. What we are witnessing right now in the book, it's called the Dark Jubilee, is the world is returning, mainstream culture is returning back to its unchristian state, its anti-Christian state, its pagan state. That's why every day we turn on the news and we see another move to it. It's not an accident. It's part of the mystery. Now, that doesn't mean there can't be revival, because one of the other mysteries is that where was the church 2,000 years ago? What was our original state? It was the book of Acts. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't rich. It wasn't cultural. It was revolutionary, radical, prophetic, world changing. Well, God is calling us to go back to our possession, which is the book of Acts. And even through persecution, God's going to use those who stand strong. God will make us again the book of Acts. So there is so much, and I would say this, Paul, because I'm speed doing this, and I can only touch on a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. But the other thing is that the Jubilee is very personal because it's about our whole thing. Because what is our lives? Our whole life is, listen, we lost something, and now God is calling us to come home. What is salvation? It's God saying, come home.
That's beautiful. It's like again, the story of the prodigal son coming home. And that's what you're aiming for with this book, sounds like. I mean, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to reading this book. Again, The Oracle, and it's available at hopeoftheworld.org or theoracleiscoming.com. Boy, it's a fascinating, very interesting look at biblical prophecy. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for making the time for us here today.
Thank you, Paul. Listen, it began in Canada, so this is the first one there, and it's an honor to be with you.
Most of the world's governments are now functioning with a high level of debt, and most Canadian households are doing the very same. Why can't we seem to stick to a reasonable budget? We're going to get some help with this here today with Michael Bell, president of Managing God's Money. He's also an adjunct professor of business administration at Briarcrest College and author of Business Simplified, which is available at managinggodsmoney.com. Michael, so good to have you on with us again. Tell me, why do people have trouble sticking to a budget?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to be here with you, Paul. And the simple answer is because, with all due respect, most people don't understand what a budget is. They do what is intuitive, but it's actually not right. They focus on the money. They focus on the money. And if you think about it, it's like saying the hockey score was 5-2. Let's just look at the hockey score. Maybe it should be 3-2. That's what you do. What you do when you say the hockey score was 5-2 and I'm the coach, I go back and I look at my players, I look at my formation, I look at everything. What we should do, we should say, what are money drivers? I bought clothes, a shirt, a pants, 6 of this. I bought a car, as opposed to say, oh, my budget was $5 and I spent $4. That's the score. In a nutshell, that it is. You see, the thing is, a budget is a GPS to get you from here to there, period. And if we understand that the GPS, the car doesn't take you, you drive the car. That's the budget.
So I'm blaming the budget when I should be looking in the mirror at myself, right? Yeah, you say that. We should ask some good questions. What did I buy? And of course, if we're wondering, how come there's so much money left at the end of the month? We need to find out where the leak is, right? And I think it's true. I know I've talked to many people who are simply not aware of where their money is going. So, I mean, that's step one, I guess, is to find out where the money's going, right?
Yeah, well, step one actually is to understand your spending pattern, which effectively is where the money goes. But for example, the typical Canadian household spends 50% of their after-tax income on food, clothing, transportation, and shelter. 50%. If you add another 20%, that would take you to taxes. So 70% generally food, clothing, transportation, taxes, and shelter. But the challenge is different. The high level income people might be paying 27% tax, and at the bottom, they're paying 1%. But that's the profile. We don't really want to look at the profile, but we really want to understand what is it I'm spending on and manage the driver, what I'm spending on. You see, what society has done, society has taught us to look at money, and that's the problem. So society says, look at a car payment of $150 a month. Look at the electricity at $123. So we look at all of these as opposed to say, I control electricity consumption. I actually can control my car mileage, but the payment I don't control, because once I agree to it, it goes out and out. So the decision should be A, what type of transport do I need, as opposed to G, I can spend $150 a month. What type of transport that fits within my lifestyle? That's what we should be doing, and we don't do that.
We don't ask the right question. You're saying, why am I spending this? You know, should I be spending this much and so forth, right? Yeah, I know we talk about the envelope system sometimes, and sometimes I wonder if our governments should use an envelope system. They might be functioning better. You know, big envelopes, I guess. But is that helpful along with the right questions to use something, you know, where we're only going to spend this much money because we've now assessed how much we're spending and what we're spending and why we're spending it. That sort of thing, putting it into an envelope sort of category?
The envelope system is a great training wheel, but we've got to get beyond the envelope system because, again, the envelope system focuses on money. Paul, as I said, it's counterintuitive. The issue is we must never look at the money. We must look at the lifestyle. It's the lifestyle that creates spending. What type of lifestyle can I afford? And one of the things I teach is that effectively there are 3 different life stages. So you just come out of college, your lifestyle is going to reflect a sacrificial type of living and therefore a sacrificial type of budget. So you can't afford a Lamborghini, not now, maybe later on. And then you go from the sacrificial to the supplemental. So you can add some additional things. And then you go to the sustaining where you can do the vacations and the yachts and whatever it is. But fundamentally, we've got to look at lifestyle. What does that mean? It means that we should sit down and we should say, what is affordable? Affordable does not mean I can pay next month's rent and next month's car payment. Affordable means I can develop some goals and plans and have funds to support those goals and plans. So a budget, what is a budget? A budget is your best estimate today to achieve goals in a future. Goals. And every goal must have a plan. The goal is the destination, the GPS, and every goal must have a plan. There are 3 different routes to get from here to there. Which route do I take? And as we go along, you know, the GPS is going to say, oh, gee, you've arrived. I say, no, I haven't arrived. Okay, so then you've got to adjust your route and then proceed. That's budgeting. I call it the peace budgeting system. You have a goal and then P, you have a plan. Then you estimate the cost of the plan. Then you act, you actually do it. Then you compare where you are with where you ought to be. And then E, you execute changes. It's circular. You keep going.
Yeah, you're adjusting that GPS, like you say, recalculating.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah.
And this ties in, I think, with another an acronym that you have. It's an equation, actually, A plus B equals C, and that is the attitude leads to behavior, resulting in consequences. So somehow our whole outlook, our attitude needs to change, right?
Yes, it all comes back to the attitude. For instance, the attitude is what we believe. Many people see a budget as a straitjacket, as something confining them. But the budget is a tool. We control the budget. People say, my budget is $5. And no, you know what? My goal to achieve this item is $5. But if the goal changes and I can find some funds, I'll change it to 7. Or I change the goal. A budget is dynamic. And we don't see the budget as dynamic. The other thing is people think that the budget is only done either when you're in debt or you're living paycheck to paycheck or there is a problem. But it's a lifestyle. You know, my wife and I, we've been budgeting we've been married almost 50 years. We've been budgeting for 47 or so of those years. Because the earlier years, we were just running ahead. And even though I'm an accountant, I just thought I knew it. But I didn't, because I had to learn my spending pattern. So the key is the budget is a tool. The budget is the score. The numbers is the score. We have to go behind the score to understand what we do to generate the score, write a game plan, ensure we have the appropriate positions in this game plan to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. And
Yeah.
that's
Well,
it.
you just mentioned that the budget is not a straitjacket, rather a freeing tool. You actually have a list, 7 things a budget is not, and that was the number 1 thing there, a straitjacket. That's an interesting list. If you have time, you want to go through that here a little bit. I think number 2 was what a budget is not about yesterday, but rather about tomorrow.
Yes, and why that is so important, people say, well, I spent, especially governments, we spent $1 billion last year, we need to spend $1.010 billion. And I'm thinking, no, you've got to look at your goals and maybe you should reduce it. And one of the things, I mean, the governments are master wasters of money. I mean, sorry, I won't go there, but they waste a lot of money because they focus on money. The third one is the budget is not about the numbers or the figures. The budget is about goals and plans. So today, you're a university student and you want to do your master's. It's not, I need so much money. It's, okay, what does the master's entail? The other thing we forget is that the budget, even though it seems to be money, it's about time as well. Because if I do this, I can't do something else. So the budget is not about figures. The budget is about your goals and also about the time and talents that you have. The other thing that people say, oh, I'll just look at the budget and maybe I'll put 20% for this. And your budget isn't about percentages. Your budget isn't about what your percent is. You've got to look at you. For example, if one were to look at my budget for eating out, it's 0. I don't do that.
That's why you're so slim.
And my daughter would say, yeah, but you had a heart attack.
That's another story.
That's another story. So the other thing, the budget is not done only when you're in debt, but it's a good lifestyle tool to help you. And here's the thing, Paul, when you're budgeting, you're looking ahead. And what the budget does, it helps you to see obstacles, help you to see challenges. And then today, in advance, you can plan to adjust to deal with those challenges. Maybe I defer this, maybe I take this, and so on. The other one is the budget does not and will never change your financial condition. The lifestyle choices change your financial conditions. It's not the budget. And the budget is not designed for that. The budget is not meant to constrain or confine. For instance, people would say to me, what's your budget for this? I say, I don't know. You know, they say you're going to buy this particular suit. What's your budget? I don't know. I need to see what type of suit I want. Do I want it to last long, et cetera, and then I can think about it. But I can't go in and say, well, the budget is $200. I don't know. But what we do is we do that first. And that's not the right approach to do it. And finally, the budget is not a free pass to spend. And that's what governments do. They'll say in February, oh, we have $10 zillion left over. Let's spend. And of course, being major league wasters of funds, they just waste funds. You know, they tax and they spend, and they tax and they spend. And that's what they do. But that's not what the budget is about. The budget is not to say if you have $5 to buy something and it costs you $3, that $2 is not available in the budget. It comes out because the budget wasn't about the money. The budget was about your ability to get that thing. And that's a concept that's hard to accept, and many people don't accept it, actually.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's wisdom. And as you pointed out earlier, too, you know, it's not just because you're in debt that you're budgeting. Wealthy people budget. They plan ahead. They've got some goals. We can learn something from this, right? We want to get to that place as well. So start now, even if we don't have a lot to work with, right? So on a practical note, should we have an emergency fund of some kind as well, generally speaking, for the average family in Canada?
Crucial. What I normally say is the word emergency doesn't mean that something is going to crop up unplanned. It's actually going to happen. You just don't know when. The car is going to break down. The fridge is going to break down. So what I say to people, don't think of it as an emergency fund, because it's going to happen. We just don't know when. So in my teaching, I have something called a capital fund, and it's actually on the website. And what the capital fund does is you sit down and you say, okay, the car has 5 years to go, or 4 years to go, or 3 years, and at replacement, it's going to be $5,000. So each year I should be putting $1,000 aside. So what I say, because it's not an emergency, I say plan for these, quote, emergencies, and have roughly, my experience is between 3 and 6 months equivalent of your salary in that emergency fund, not as money, but as representing the car breaking down, the tires, and so specific things.
The inevitabilities of life in the real world, right? So, Michael, what do you think? Again, many of us, I think, confuse needs with wants. Any advice on how to sort that out for our viewers today?
Yeah, my grandson, when he was 3, my wife said to him, Dylan, I need a kiss. He says, Grandma, you don't need a kiss. You want a kiss.
That's funny.
And I call that the Dylan principle. Because the thing is, if we look at what's today, you know, one of the things I do from time to time, I walk around in shopping centers and I say, what do we need here for life, to sustain life, for health, for something that I must have to function, otherwise I'm going to get ill. And I say, nothing. I also sit down and analyze some of my people that I counsel, and I say to them, let's go over all of these things that got you into debt. Nothing was needed. So my suggestion is, when we're thinking about needs, we should really start to, what is something that's legally, morally, ethically, and for health that's required? That's a need.
Right. It breaks it down a lot.
Yeah. And you know, we live in the most amazing country in the world. You know, it's not like in the States where you have the health issues. And you know, there are some real serious constraints. No, and if I could just quickly say, you know, with my heart attack, I'm telling you, I found the health system, which sometimes I'm pretty negative about, it basically cost me nothing. And I got outstanding care, really outstanding care. So in Canada, I'm saying we don't need, the other challenge, Paul, is people think they have to own a house. Owning a house is a privilege. And especially today, most young people are better off not owning a house, because you're going to end up with the cost of owning and also the cost as if you were renting. Why? Because you're not going to have any equity in the home and you're paying this mortgage, and the market eventually is going to go down. And we need to say it's fine to rent. It really is fine. I call it the 11th commandment. Thou shalt rent. Thou shalt rent if thou wantest.
Boy, we're up against the clock here, but that's a whole other conversation we might have one day on this as well. You know, because again, there's taxes, and of course, like you say, depending on which market you're in, it could be a real challenge to own a house. But boy, thank you so much, Michael. As always, a pleasure to have you on, and I really appreciate your outlook and wisdom on life.
Thank you for having me, and I always appreciate you talking about these issues that are so important to Canadians.
They are. Michael Bell, president of Managing God's Money, managinggodsmoney.com. And on behalf of all of us at Bridge City News, thank you so much for watching today.